District 6 of the RTM, and we are here for a discussion of Great Island, of the town's potential purchase of Great Island. This is a public meeting meant for our district, but we're not sure if anyone is really going to come, so that's fine. We just wanted to have an opportunity to discuss what people are hearing, what people are thinking, concerns, questions, that sort of thing. We are not taking any vote tonight. So this is simply a discussion, and that's the only topic on the agenda. We have some town officials here tonight. We have members of the public. And so I thought I'd start by just going around this table and asking people what you're hearing, if you had any particular concerns or questions yourself, or if people you've talked to have, anything that you feel hasn't been addressed, any statement you want to make, anything like that, and then we will take questions from people in the audience. So, Bill.
I'm Bill Van Loan. I live at 60 Main Street. I've heard, obviously, comments on both sides of the ledger here. I think each side has some particular points about their opinions that are quite valid, but overall, each of us is going to have to make a decision on which they think is the better solution, one way or the other. And I think personally, I think it's a very desirable piece of property. I've lived here since 1947. This property never even dreamed of becoming available, any part of it, until within the last couple of years. I agree it's a lot of money, but I think it's the right thing to do to buy it.
Okay. Allie.
My name is Allie Costanzo. I live at 31 Little Brook Road, next to Selleck's Woods. So we appreciate the open space in town. We have two little kids, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. We were able to tour the island, and it is beautiful. I share a lot of the same concerns about other people. How much money is this going to cost? What are all of the unknown expectations? When you walk through the Great House, it's beautiful, but as a homeowner, you just shake your head at the amount of work that's going to need to be done. So I am here to kind of listen to other people's thoughts. I'm leaning more towards approving it than not, because I think it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but I do have hesitations and reservations on whether we're biting off more than we can chew, whether we know the whole picture. So.
Okay. Liza.
I'm Liza Lucas, and I agree with Bill and Allie. I feel like this is a huge opportunity for the town, in the same sense that, Central Park was, not an easy purchase for New York City and other places when they were creating green space that is critical for a town to thrive. I have 5 children, and I know there's been a lot of heat on this from folks in the education community, and I understand that because I think people are worried about the budget. And I think that's the only downside here is this is a ton of money, and we have to figure out how to do it if we can do it properly. I'm interested in Frank's idea when he was talking at the public hearing about having a separate board to oversee this, a group that would be filled with, professionals, so it could be done perfectly, perfectly. And I'm here tonight, as I said, I would like to hear more. I feel like I still have a lot of homework to do, but I would like to see things line up that in a way that it could work. That would be wonderful.
Thanks. Janet?
I'm Janet Grogan, and I think that the main thing I've learned from the people that I've talked to is the indecision on most people's parts. I was surprised that the first 3 people I asked thought we'd already bought it. And then that just sort of left them with feeling perhaps they felt stupid and couldn't. It was hard to go on to say any more for a while. And it seemed that every question that I've heard asked has made just more opportunities for questions. So I think that we're just here now to decide to vote whether we're going to buy it or not. And then all the questions that are continuing to be asked, I don't think are helpful to making decisions one way or the other. There's an awful lot of people don't follow the bonding process and all that ins and outs of that, and so that I can only say that I'm glad to have heard more ideas about it. I think getting a group of people that are willing to contribute financially to it right up front, and to get some kind of group out there that lets people know that they're willing to take contributions, and getting that out early for people who might want to financially contribute would be helpful. That's all.
Thank you. Peter?
I'm Peter Orfanos, I live at 67 Raymond Street. I am undecided and very, very conflicted. I share the feeling that regarding the opportunity before us, the value of the property, I stipulate to all those things, and there's no question. However, I'm concerned that we're not getting a full, we need to make sure we have a full understanding of the magnitude of the expenditure, and not just for this, but going forward. I mean, I think we have to examine how, we can't obviously come up with plans in a week to be able to say we're going to do A, B, C, or D. I understand that. But there needs to be some understanding of what type of expenditures are going to be involved in the house. I mean, it is, I apologize for the vernacular, but I think we are buying a money pit. I think people need to understand that. And in terms of renovating existing property, existing structures for whatever uses we may choose to embark on, and new things that we might do. I know that there are people that are very concerned about impact on existing town services. I have heard people, I've heard RTM members say, well, we're just gonna have to tighten up other budgets to be able to afford this. If that's the case, then in my mind, by definition, we can't afford it. Either we can afford to go on, we need to be able to support, whether it be public safety, parks and rec, and especially education, all other programs. We need to support the way we continue to support them going forward without regard to the impact of this budget. I don't think there are people who are thinking that way. And so, on the other hand, I was traveling this weekend, I was up near Boston, and ran into a bunch of people from town who I'd not known, and I literally just said in a social setting, oh, by the way, what do you think? Should we buy Great Island? They're like, absolutely, need to go forward. And it was it's a no-brainer, we don't even need to think about it. And I didn't react to it, but I thought that's actually the wrong way of looking at it. I think we need to think very hard, and everybody needs to know what we're getting into to the best extent, especially as we are having economic turbulence. We're facing that going forward. That could change the equation for a lot of these, for a lot of the financials. So I'm keeping an open mind and continuing to listen. I'm glad we could do this today, this evening. So that's,
Okay.
I mean, the timing issue for me is a big deal. I've been told that when we couldn't do anything about it, And I know that we can't sort of look back and ask for things to be done, but in my mind, if we had known that we were gonna have this type of compressed time schedule, 2.5 to 3 weeks to vote on $100 million, then I think there should have been buy-in or participation from representative, from representative committees in our body as part of the negotiating team, as part of the team working on this. And for one example, I had someone talk to me about, we could sort of structure, you could structure a deal like this a number of different ways. And the trouble is, we're not voting on that. We're not saying, we don't have the authority to say, well, why don't we do this, or why don't we do that? It's done, this is what we have to vote on. And I think if we'd had different levels of participation ahead of time with the team working on the deal, then we might be in a better position to act within this compressed timeframe.
Teresa Vogt, 22 Circle Road. When I was at the cocktails at the courtyard of the library, and I spoke to a young by my standards, but like relatively new resident, and I asked him what he thought, and he was like, oh my God, this is a great idea. He's like, so what, it's $103 million. And I explained to him, I said, it's $103 million just to buy it. So that does not include having a parking lot there. It does not include any improvements needed to the property. It includes, it's just simply to buy it, that's it. And he looked at me and was like, oh. And it gave him pause. And I think a lot of taxpayers don't understand. I have watched the F&B meeting last week. I watched the Board of Finance meeting last week. And basically, every financial argument made by those two boards, for the most part, is why we should not buy this property. I have been on the RTM and I've been involved in budgets for a long time in this town. And even just this year alone, all I heard was, this town cannot see this kind of growth in our budgets. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. That's all I ever hear. And even you said, after this budget cycle, we need to tighten our belts next year. How, it is what you said, it was in an article. How do we, I just don't understand how a town says that a $103 million purchase, just the purchase, nothing that needs to be done to the property, is not going to impact the town or education. And in fact, your committee had members say, well, we're gonna have to do without for some things. And that is not why we moved to this town. We moved to this town for our schools. We moved to this town for our ability to get to work. We do not live here for a $103 million purchase. So that is just my take on it.
Okay.
Hi, Shannon Silsby, 42 Mansfield Avenue. Talking to a lot of neighbors, it's been so gorgeous out, haven't seen you. But a mixed bag. I don't know if you're getting a mixed bag as well. A lot of folks who tend to don't have as much information, Peter, saying let's do it, we need more open space. A lot of other folks saying what about schools? So I'm definitely here tonight to learn more. I don't know if we have anybody here, maybe one person, to hear more about what people in our district think. I, for one, think of the tax dollar as a dollar that is split many different ways, and so I would love to buy this island, but no, I would love open choice. And even though they're two different budgets, I'm mindful they ladder back to Board of Finance. How can it be too expensive to have 10 kindergartners come to school here, but we could buy an island, is what I'm really personally wrestling with. And I'm mindful they're two different apples and two different opportunities, and one goes away, poof, and we can never change if Great Island sells to someone else. What may happen to that space and to the ecosystems and to the opportunities that kids have and that adults have to really enjoy and gain perspective from a space like that, but definitely still undecided and trying to sort through the data.
Okay. Barry?
Barry Baldwin, I live at 10 Rock Spring Lane. I listened to the presentations, and both by the selectmen and then also the open meeting, the public meeting and hearing, and 2 hours of speakers. And I've gotten some comments from other folks. And in general, I guess most people that I have heard have expressed the concern that it's awfully expensive, but it's a situation that doesn't come along often, and we can't pass it up. And so I'm really looking at it as, in a week, the RTM has to decide whether to support what the selectmen have decided to do and what the Board of Finance has decided that we can afford to do. And that's when the real difficult stuff starts, and that is how to manage it. And I think Frank made some very good comments at the public hearing about a recommendation on how we should go about setting up the management of it. But the decisions, the really tough job is going to come over the next 2, 3, 5 years, trying to figure out what to do with it. I don't expect to just be going out there and having picnics next summer. It's going to be a real asset worth buying. I don't think we're going to regret. Actually, I worry that we will really regret not buying it. But we do have to work very hard to manage it properly.
Okay, thank you. Frank?
Thanks, Barry. Yeah. Frank Edelman, 3 Harry Lane East. I concur. It's a fantastic property. It's a magnificent opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But right now it's in private hands. And it might stay in private hands. That's okay. I've never been invited to Great Island yet. And if it stays in private hands, I won't be. It's really no skin off my nose. I'm in here, if it's private, it's private. I would love to have it for the town. It's a fantastic opportunity. I would love to be able to find a way to give this to our children and our grandchildren. But I just because it's once in a lifetime doesn't mean that we're obligated to do this. My biggest concerns, and Barry, I thank you for your compliment. My biggest concerns about this are governance. In 2 senses, the governance operationally, what goes on Great Island, and the governance financially, how does this impact the rest of our budgets? And I've shared some thoughts about creating an independent Great Island Commission that would have responsibility for managing what goes on Great Island and managing the operation of Great Island to address the first concern, and that in my personal view should have, and my view alone, this is not any official viewpoint of any other committee, it's just me. I think this should have similar assessment powers this independent committee should have similar assessment powers as to the sewer commission, so that it can independently raise assessments in order to keep this out of the mill rate and to avoid the pressure and the compression on the rest of the budget. I share the concern, Teresa, that you expressed about pressure on all the rest of the operating budgets. We have people in town here who are excellent financial managers and who mean only well, but their perspective is, I haven't met a belt I couldn't tighten. I pinch pennies until they scream. I have my pencil always sharp. And that is, I think, if that's how we pay for Great Island, I agree with Teresa then that we're making the wrong choice, because we have many competing priorities in this town, and Great Island, as fantastic an opportunity as it is the least of those priorities. So if we have $100 million for this, we better make sure that we are defending all the other priorities in the budget, both the ones we know about today, that we've talked about, the ones that certain committees know about, because there's a lot of smart people who manage capital down the road that just hasn't been surfaced as part of the conversation yet, as well as the contingencies that no one can foresee. So I personally think that segregating out this purchase, both from an operational and a financial point of view, is essential to making sure that the governance is robust. Without strong governance on this to make sure that this doesn't go down either a misguided operational path or a misguided financial path, I'll have a hard time supporting it.
Okay, thank you. And I am Caroline Luz, 23 Fairview Avenue. And I live in the same neighborhood as Shannon, and so I've heard from the same people you have. I've had 3 people say, of course we should buy it. That goes without saying, how can we not? And I've had 2 people write letters saying, what are you talking about? This will just throw the taxes out of whack. It's a bad idea. So like everybody, I'm grappling with, oh my gosh, once in a generational opportunity. I also worry about the cost of not buying it. If we don't buy it, who does buy it and what happens there? Does a neighborhood get put up? Does that impact me? Does that impact the town? Does that mean 60 more school children, and where do we put them and how do we pay for that? So those are some of the things that I'm also thinking about. One of the things that came up in my planning and zoning meeting last week was we're not going to have all the answers before we have to make this decision. And we all need to just be prepared to use our judgment, get as much information as we can, but you can't be holding out for the final answer because it's not going to be there. There are going to be some unresolved questions as we go into this. I've also heard, there should be a referendum, and I don't even know if there is a referendum. Would it have to be before June 30th or whatever it is? Maybe you all know that, or would that be a decision that could be pushed down the road? That I'm not sure, so we'll come to you, and I would love for you to address those kind of things. So those are the things that I'm grappling with. The one thing that I will say, which is probably everybody's going to hate me, my kids have gone through the Darien school system, and it's a great school system. I love it, but I do think that we sometimes make that the biggest priority in town to the detriment of some other things. And so I am not okay with saying the school should be the thing that gets all the money. Now, I do worry about, I don't know, I mean, I listened to some of what Jim was saying too, but I remember an F&B when Jack was talking at the May budget meeting. He said very distinctly, guys, we got lucky this year because we had some extra income and grants coming in, but if we think we can spend like this going forward, we are nuts. So I am very worried about what comes down the road, and I think we're going to have to make cuts in a lot of different areas. But that doesn't mean to me that we don't buy this. I'm just not like all of you. I'm grappling, and not really sure. So we have consensus. Everybody knows what to do, right? I'd love to hear from some of the people in the audience, and we can continue this discussion at the table, but
Am I the only constituent?
you might be the only constituent. If you're the constituent, you go first. What's your
So
name?
I'll start with the argument.
What is your name?
I'm sorry, David Vogt, 22 Circle Road.
Okay.
And you
Full
have heard-
disclosure, he's my husband.
Yeah, and I think we
Well
all
done.
saw your letter, so we kind of
So
know.
let me start with
where
the
you're coming
once in a lifetime opportunity argument.
Mhm.
This came to the market in 2016 at $175 million. So it's been available effectively off and on as a pocket listing for 6 years. That being said, the fact that the Board of Selectmen has no idea what they're going to do with the property, whether it could be taxable or non-taxable debt, depending on how they use the property, shows unbelievable lack of diligence and foresight over the past 6 years. So the fact that we're under pressure to close this deal immediately is a really big red flag. Any sort of first select person or Board of Selectmen should have been thinking about this in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Pick your year. So the fact that Monica could stand up there and argue this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that just came into our lap is just a flat-out lie. Second, the financing structure, and I know we have 3 members of the Board of Finance here, is just fiscally irresponsible. Effectively, we're financing it with 2 interest-only rollovers, effectively, because we don't know what the use case is. So we're gonna borrow $100 million, pay interest on it, because we don't know what we're gonna do with it in a year. We're gonna roll the $100 million again, because we don't know what we're gonna do with it. And so we're exposing the town to massive interest rate risk. So this is a $100 million investment. Over the next 30 years, at current interest rates, it's a $250 million investment. If rates change by a point, that's another $30 million. So we have to be prepared that in 2 years' time, nobody has a crystal ball. I think Jim mentioned it. I don't have a crystal ball. But we're basically making a bet on where interest rates are going to be in 2 years. If interest rates are higher, the town's going to suffer. If interest rates are lower, this will look like a better deal. Not a great deal, but a better deal. The other part that I would want to make is the fact that the argument that if someone else comes in and buys it, we don't know what it's gonna look like. Well, that should have been a scenario provided by the Board of Selectmen. It's 2 acre zoning according to the real estate agent. It's 100.
It's not, it's 1 acre zoning.
Okay, so she told me at the I think it was the Board of Select meeting, that a developer came to her and said 25 houses on 2 acres. She told me personally at the meeting that Monica hosted in Town Hall. So think about that for a second. A builder's gonna buy that land for $100 million. Cost to build a house, square footage with lumber, labor shortages, construction loan, it's easily $400 to $500 a square foot. You're gonna put a 6,000 square foot house. You gotta carry the land, construction loan for 2 years. Where are you gonna find the people to build these houses on spec? And then you're gonna have to sell these. So you're talking about a massive increase in the tax base. And by the way, not everybody in this town goes to public school. A very large percentage of the kids go to private school. If you're buying a $6, $7, $8 million house, there is a very high probability that you're gonna send your kid to a private school. Is it 10%, 20%, 30%? I don't know the exact number. So to argue that there's gonna be a flood of people into the schools is just, again, a scare tactic. If you build 25 houses and you get 20 kids in the school, that's 50 basis points of enrollment in the district. There's 4,000 kids in the school district. It doesn't hurt the district one bit. Even if all those kids go to Tokenie, which they won't, there'll be various ages. So my point is that it's a scare tactic. There's been no alternative scenario. I wish the Board of Finance sat up the other day and said, here's our base case, here's our bear case, here's our bull case, what could go right, what could go wrong, here's what the middle case is, but they didn't do that. So without that information, how could the townspeople have a reasonable assessment for what this is gonna look like over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? It's quite frankly irresponsible, and there's been no diligence done. So that's why I wrote the letter. Like, if we went through this process over the next 3 to 4 months and came to the conclusion we can't finance this properly, or a builder was really gonna build this for their carrying cost, $200 million, then maybe it's interesting. None of that work has been done. If it has, it hasn't been shared with anyone in the community that I've talked to individually. And that's my major hesitation with the deal. It's just financially irresponsible, and quite frankly, it doesn't meet the duty of care from Monica's perspective. She's an elected official. She owes the town a duty of care, which she hasn't accomplished.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to debate anyone on any of the points.
She owes the town a what?
A duty of care.
Duty of care.
As an elected official, it's not a single transaction. If I buy your house and I make a mistake, that's on me. If we put $100+ million, she's representing all taxpayers. There is called diligence and duty of care as an elected official in the state of Connecticut. Every time you ask her a question, what are we to do with this, she says, I don't know. I don't know.
She's one member of the Board of
Excuse me.
Selectmen.
But the whole board is
There's
selectmen.
100 million, there's 100 people on the RTM that are gonna make a decision. It isn't Monica alone.
No, but my point is, before it gets to the board of, the RTM, the diligence had to be provided for you to make an educated decision. People around this table said, I don't know. I've heard from constituents who don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's an unacceptable answer. I work in finance like a lot of people in this town. If I went to my board of directors and said, I don't know what this project's gonna look like over the next 5, 10 years, I'd get fired immediately.
We know it's a piece of land. That's the main reason we're buying it, not for the old house that's falling down.
I understand, so.
None of the structures are the reason we're buying this
But
thing.
to make I'll give you an example. To buy a $100 million piece of land over 30 years, your total cost of ownership is gonna be at least $250 million. When you factor in maintenance, lost property taxes, interest expense. So to break even on that land, that has to accrete 3% a year for the next 30 years. If you go back to COVID, before COVID to 2008, houses in Darien were flat. There was no appreciation in real estate in Darien. So if you make an assumption that there's no appreciation in real estate in Darien, which is not what the Board of Finance showed, this is a massive money-losing investment. Real estate doesn't go up in perpetuity.
Hang on for a
Hold
second.
on.
You guys can, I'll give you
I-
one more back and forth,
I
and
don't
then I
have
wanna
to
hear
say
from
anything
Susan.
more. I said my piece. It's a
Yeah,
piece
but
of
so my
land you're
point is,
buying.
people are making a decision with basically 10, 20, 30% of the information that they need to make an informed decision. And you mentioned that, okay, we're gonna have to vote on conscience without incomplete information. So if you stood, I'll ask an honest question to all of you. If you stood in front of all of your constituents at town hall and said, I don't know why I'm voting for this, I'm gonna have to vote on incomplete information, I'm pretty sure most people would be upset with that statement. I would be.
excuse me, they bought the Louisiana Purchase, they bought Alaska, all these things were big problems.
And those are mineral-rich, environmentally rich.
Nobody knew anything then, you know it. as
We
much as
know
I
it's
do.
there, but you know, okay, here, okay, I'm gonna throw another thing.
Okay,
Where are
wait,
your
wait,
oyster
wait,
beds?
stop for a second,
There's
okay.
no information.
I understand your point. We know that we don't have all the information. That is absolutely correct, that's true. And I'm gonna send you two to the corner to talk about the Louisiana Purchase. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the
Well, I
Louisiana
was-
Purchase. So,
Yes.
I'm in favor of that one. But I do wanna hear from other
Quick
people,
response.
yes.
Mr. Vogt, I don't think that this is being justified on financial grounds alone. So I take your point on the financials, but I don't think that that's the only motivation here.
It's
I don't want to debate it, but
Frank, can I say, on open space, did we look at the Pear Tree Point property? Pear Tree Point School?
I can't
We
answer
did
that
not.
question.
We
So,
did not.
I'm just saying, just
So,
as a
my
factual
point is,
statement, we're
why-
not trying to justify this on pure financial grounds.
Why did
That's
why
not
did the
just
town pass on the Pear Tree Point acreage by the beach? They didn't even look
Different kind
at
of
it.
spaces.
I have no idea if it,
That's my point.
you
We
know,
even,
it came up, but
even
we
though we
did.
first right of refusal on the Oxford Hunt Club, I understand that. However, that cost, the time to close that transaction was over 18 months, and there were dozens and dozens of letters to the editor, hundreds of emails back and forth by people that lived in that area. There were meetings back and forth, and it wasn't done until those people were satisfied that it met the standard where they lived. So if you live by, let's say you live next door to that property, have those people been given the opportunity to come in and speak their piece? I guarantee you 99% of the people in this town have no idea that this is going on, and to the extent that.
I would like to address that for a moment because that came up in our meeting the other day. Too bad is my view on that. It has been all over the news, it's been everywhere. If you don't know about it, that's on you. There are a lot of people trying to make sure that people do know about it, and I think there needs to be a certain level of civic engagement
I
or
agree
you
with
don't
that,
get to
and the
complain.
best part of civic engagement is
So-
every voter has a voice.
So,
And that was with the shuffle, there was a referendum. With Darien High School, it was a $75 million investment in 2002-ish, 2003. It was a referendum. A $75 million commitment to build a new high school had to go to a referendum.
yeah,
Exactly, this is a
I was
$100 million parcel of
Um,
land that has no economic utility, as Frank just pointed out, and that there's no vote by the townspeople, where it was decided
It-
upon.
It may end up having
I don't know,
economic
Frank said there's
utility.
no
We don't-
economic
No, no,
utility.
okay, I'm
It's
sorry,
that-
Frank. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
mean to-
not, it's not a holistic economic.
I would like, okay, I'm gonna
I-
recognize Barry and then I would like to hear from some of the town officials if they would like to
I thought the
talk.
point of this meeting was to hear input.
Yeah, no,
And we've heard the input.
So I
It's not
think-
a debate meeting.
no, you're right, so,
Can I just say something? I think we should be reminded that we have 3 big housing projects coming in with a certain number of children. And for us to continue to speculate on whether people who live there are gonna send their 24 children to private school or not is frankly embarrassing.
Okay, can I tell you, behind the, I know this isn't a debate meeting, but I've been to dozens of Board of Ed meetings, and I don't think there's anyone here on the Board of Ed. They have projections, they hire consultants, Dr. Adley, the Board of Ed staff, Duke Deneen, and so they have a reasonable guess, they have projections. If you look at the Board of Ed budget book, that's about this thick, they have projections for the next 5 years on what they think enrollment will look
well,
like.
I'd like to ask a question of, Mr. Martin or Mr. Hendrickson, or anybody who might know. Yes, we've known that this property is there, but I'm not sure how much actual notice we had that the property was for sale and we could buy it, and I believe we're in a position of having to make a quick decision because that's how it happened. I may be wrong about that, but I'm not sure that we've had 18 months to really figure it out and do all the things that you're talking about, which would be the ideal way to go about it. But maybe somebody can address
The
that,
timeline.
the timeline.
Well, this is a district caucus for you all to hear from your constituents.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you think answering a few questions is helpful to your constituents, those
I
that
do,
are here.
Yes.
I do,
Like I
yeah.
said, the one that's here tonight or those that are watching, happy
Or
to-
us.
Yeah,
to share
us.
like a few facts. So
Yeah.
I guess I spent most of my time over the last 2.5 or 3 months, I think, with our board since Monica got us involved when this really became sort of something that she was looking seriously at. And so I can only tell you sort of like the numbers, the facts, the research that we've done. I can't really I'll try to shy away from things like opinions, okay? Because there are certain facts like the majority of children in this town, there are 4,800, about 50 kids that go to school in Darien, in the public schools. The majority don't go to private schools.
That's
A very, very small
Yeah, that's like
percentage.
10 to 20%.
The majority do not.
Yeah, 10 to
So-
20% at least go to private schools.
Let him talk,
Okay.
please.
So then I would say,
Okay.
like, when you look at the bonding, you know, we tried to put together a fairly detailed analysis. There were, I think, 17 pages of cash flows. We sent around to the Board of Selectmen, the RTM, Finance and Budget Committee, others that have asked, and we put up, what we tried to create is a fairly detailed model that shows exactly if A, B, C, D, E, F, and G happen, what would happen to taxes for the median homeowner and a sort of other sample homeowner over the next 5 years. So I can speak to the actual numbers that we've put in place, I can speak to the actual process that took place since leading up to the Board of Selectmen, or Monica, I should say, signing the contract, I think on May 23rd. It came on a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, when they started looking at it. It was part of a public sale. I think somebody mentioned that this came on 5 or 6 years ago, and it did at 175 million. And that was 2 parcels, which I would say are commonly known as the
I read the
sign
article,
press.
that's not true, I'm sorry, I'm have to interrupt.
Okay, well,
I
stop.
read the interview that Jamie Stevenson gave to Darien and Darien Times in 2016. It was 60 acres, effectively the same land for $175 million, and her quote was, in the article, "I don't know how we can afford this over 20-year bonding, it's something we should do, but
That's,
Okay,
that's
but
all I
let's-
can
let's-
do. All
yeah.
I can do is talk
We're-
to actual
Let's talk
zoning
about
maps.
now, okay, yeah.
Of what was for sale when it was 175 million, which included 2 parcels. The one which was, it was one large property that was all for sale. One of them, which you all may know now, the town is under contract to buy, which is about 61 acres, which is when you drive over the Rings End Bridge and go straight, it sort of encompasses that 60-acre island between Ziegler's Cove to the west and Scott's Cove to the east. If you were to continue, if you were not go over the bridge and go up through those, to next to that stone house, instead you made it right, like you were going down to the very end of Pear Tree, or really Long Neck Point. On the left, you would drive past a barn and you'd see like a wire that's always strung right there. That's what they call now the Ziegler property, and that's about 26 or 27 acres. That's not for sale. Those 2 were combined in terms of 186 acre estate, if you will, that was for sale for $175 million. So what is for sale now is only
Part of
a
it.
strip of land when you go over the bridge and next to that house and you get out to the island. So it's a strip of land and the island, and the rest of it, which again, by the barn that they're redoing, and you see the wire that's hung across, that's gonna remain, that's not for sale.
And that's 20-something acres, 23?
26 or
So
28.
so
something
minus
like that.
75 to get to approximately $100 million. That
Does
was,
does that also include the dead-end cul-de-sac road that was put in beyond the
Yes.
barn? The
That's
26?
in
That's all part of like what they now call the Ziegler.
Right,
Right, so the
property, as
stuff
opposed to
along
the-
Long
yeah.
Neck Point
The
Road is
two
not
The 2
part.
entrances off Long
Correct.
Point
yeah.
Road.
And so
Correct.
just to clarify, sorry, it's basically the 2 parcels, is Ziegler and the Steinkraus. The Ziegler is not for sale, which we know,
Correct.
but that's where the other 75 mil came from. It
Well,
wasn't just going
yeah.
from 175 to 100 because the price was
But-
reduced.
Yeah, but
Literally
Sharon, I want to
was
be
in there.
careful.
That's not true.
The 175, I can't really subscribe what was, it was really for the whole thing. I can't really say what was for, I'm not a real estate professional, but
But
I
it's
can't
changed,
prescribe how much value
So a
was
third of
to
it's
one
on,
piece
of
versus
course,
the
but
other.
that's the map, that's the
Okay.
picture of the
So
diagram.
those are the 2 pieces.
Can I add this to the record? And I will quote, Darien town officials have considered whether to make a bid, this is from 2016, for the 62.5 acre up for sale for the first time in over a century. And First Selectman Jamie Stevenson said the current $175 million asking price is staggering. So it could have been carved up, rezoned, it's still 60 acres. The price is just dropped from 175 to 100 million. It's still roughly 60 acres. It could be parcel A here, a little bit of.
Okay, but I think that's,
But is all of it contiguous?
When you say
What we're about-
contiguous,
So,
Yes.
if you go, is all of the land
Yes.
contiguous that we are buying?
No.
Or are there gonna be
Yes.
parts of
No.
it that are not?
No,
It's all-
it's
it's
all
all
contiguous.
yes.
And the second parcel is irrelevant, Jim.
folks, it's a little bit like
Yeah.
a lollipop. When you drive over top of the Rings End Bridge, there's sort of a skinny strip that goes out.
right, and
Okay.
the circle,
you go through the traffic circle that continues, and then it's technically two parcels, but it's one big top of the lollipop,
Yeah.
if you will.
Got it.
But it doesn't
Description.
empty, what we're buying or what we may buy does not empty onto Long Neck Point Road. That's
Correct.
not
There's the
part of it.
emergency exit, but
Yes,
emergency.
okay.
But that property or egress there, that's not being purchased. Egress will be sort of directly
From
over
Rings
Grand
End,
Street.
from Rings
Right,
End Road.
but there is
Bridge.
emergency,
Okay.
but, so the second parcel is irrelevant to the historical conversation.
It,
It is, it sounds like
well,
it is.
it doesn't matter.
It's not a
Right.
sale.
Right,
I think if you check with some of your real estate brokers in town, you'll find the report that Mr. Vogt quoted maybe is a mistake. I'm
Okay.
not saying it is,
I
but I
have
think
no
it is a
idea.
mistake.
I have no idea, but at any rate,
Sounds
that's
good.
not
So
what's on
sorry.
the table now. What's
Sounds
on the
right.
table now is 103 million for the 61 acre.
Okay, sorry, Jim, so back
parcel.
to your story.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so that, I can't speak to like the value of the piece that's not for sale, right? Because that's, could be for sale never, it could be developed, it could be done a ton of different things, right? So it's a $103 million property. It is part of a competitive sale, okay? So in terms of how the Board of Selectmen had to negotiate with it against sort of others and so forth, that's like other sort of private real estate deals that we've done in the past, it's always been done privately, whether it was the one down on the beach, whether it was Short Lane by Holmes School, whether it was the Highland Farms, all of those are generally negotiated privately. What you may or may not know are things like the Oxford Hunt Club, the 3 country clubs in town and so forth. They do get certain tax abatements. In exchange for those tax abatements where they're, I would say, taxed as more like parkland rather than sort of developable lots, they get a reduction in the tax rate. But in exchange for that, the town, if they were ever to sell that, has to come to, if they were ever to sell it,
first
they
right
get
of
first
refusal.
refusal and offer like a ROFR,
Okay.
which gives them time, 6, 9, 12 months to be able to negotiate the purchase of that property, and they can do that with a lot more.
But can I add a fact to that? First right of refusal is well known, I understand that. The problem with that argument is the town came to an agreement with the Hunt Club, and it still took 18 months to close the transaction because there were a tremendous amount of kickback and pushback from the local residents. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings where people were allowed to air their grievances about noise and what's gonna go there.
Yeah, we
what
heard it all.
structure's gonna go
I know, I mean,
there.
I think part of the problem, this is another part of my problem, is that was $6 million. And then right before COVID, we were arguing over improvements over at Pear Tree. And here we are in like a couple months, we have to decide a $103 million purchase and told,
Not in a
just
couple
trust.
months, couple weeks.
Yeah, just trust the
Yeah.
process. We have no
One-
answers for you, just
Right,
trust the
right,
process.
right.
And
It's,
that's a huge ask. And this idea that we need our Waveney or our Tuscaloosa. By the way, if we were to buy Waveney today, at today's dollars, what New Canaan paid for, it'd be $18 million. I will happily buy Great Island for $18 million because the Lloyd family gifted the
Totally.
vast majority of Waveney to the town of New Canaan. New Canaan only paid for the house. 300 acres was a gift to the town of New Canaan. Todd's Point was also purchased at a low price in today's dollars. So if the Steinkraus family would like to gift us, and maybe we just pay for a small portion of it, I'd be happy to do that too. And
They're not comparable, that's the real.
they're not, like, when I hear people compare, yeah, the land is comparable, yes, but
The deal.
the deal is
the
not
deal is not
comparable.
comparable.
And we're talking about a competitive real estate deal. And again, I have sat through many budget meetings where you'll see Board of Ed members or Board of Selectmen members say, you have to give me specifics. What is this? What is that? Like, we can't just spend this money without having answers. But we're telling taxpayers, just trust this even though we don't have the answers. I really highly recommend everybody in this room watch last week's FMD meeting and last week's Board of Finance meeting. It is eye-open, and it makes the case of why financially you don't buy it.
Well, just, can we talk about, if you guys asked me about the
Yes,
finances,
I would
I'd like
like
to clear a
to-
few
yeah.
things up. The town is buying the property for $103 million, right? The Board of Finance is basically the authority that decides how we actually bond and structure this. Our municipal advisor structured 2 bands, where let's call them short-term bonds, for 2 years that would give the town the opportunity to decide what it wants to do with it. The Board of Finance may well, in this environment, decide to only finance 1/3 of it with a band, and 2/3 of it with 30-year debt right away. based on depending what the yield curve looks like right now. It could do it over 2 years, it could do it over 3 years, there's a lot of different ways that we could do it, okay? The analysis that you saw that we put forward was what our municipal advisor put forward that would give the town the greatest flexibility. But our job is to look at the combination of flexibility and the rate environment and sort of what that impact, flexibility versus rates would do to our overall spending. There are a lot of numbers being thrown out. I can only talk to the ones that exist in a spreadsheet that are on a screen that you can actually diligence and so forth. When you issue 30-year debt, just so everybody knows, it's like a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage. It has a 15-year average life because you pay it off on average over 15 years. So when we talk about an extra 100 basis points on $100 million, it's not $30 million over 30 years, it's 15 because you're paying it on average for 15 years. So there's a lot of, if you want to look at things, sensitize things to interest rates, which we have, and what we presented to the town last Wednesday basically showed 100 to 150 basis points above today's environment and made certain assumptions about where municipal tax exempt rates are trading relative to taxable rates, which right now that arbitrage, if you will, normally tax exempt rates are 30% below taxable rates. They're more like 90% right now. So we baked in a lot of conservative assumptions to put forward and try to estimate for the taxpayers, for the Board of Selectmen, for the RTM, and for everyone else in this town to look at and try to understand what would the effect be on a median homeowner and a $3 million homeowner, to show what this would be over time and what would be relative to other things. Like you all recall that we spent, we'll bond about $56 million for Oxbridge. And you all remember the analyses at the RTM when they talked about what Oxbridge would do to the average homeowner's budget, right? It was never discussed. You may recall at the HHR committee, when the RTM voted on that, I think a week and a half ago, you may not recall the analysis that showed what does the incremental $74 million for schools on top of the other $56 million, what is that going to cost the average taxpayer? You probably don't remember that number because it was never discussed.
So can I ask you?
So
when-
what we
you-
tried to
you
lay
have
out
put
in
that
our
in
analysis
here.
was, I went back
put
and
that
said,
in here.
let's look at our taxes and let's look at all the incremental things that are coming in line, because while the Board of Finance did bond the equivalent of $56 million of proceeds, we haven't started repaying any of it. We just started paying interest on the first slug, and we'll start paying interest on the next slug in 2023, fiscal 2023, and we won't start paying principal for another year and a half or so. So what we did was we showed what the effect of the decision that we all made, I think it was near unanimous, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and pretty much on the RTM, to spend that $56 million, plus the $74 million that you guys were all graciously approved a few weeks ago. We showed what the effect of that will be as HHR. We won't issue a bond for probably another 6 to 9 months, and we'll issue a third of it in 1 year, a third of it in 2 years, and a third of it in 3 years. So what we did was we showed for the average homeowner, how does that layer in over the next 5 years when we have what I would refer to as the fully loaded Oxbridge, the fully loaded HHR, and the fully loaded Great Island. And we start paying
Basically-
principal, and then we loaded on top of that, what if the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen, the 7 on the Board of Finance, and the 100 members of the RTM, of which this is one of the 6 districts, or I think it's maybe 8 now?
Six.
Okay. We'll all have to vote on it, so we said, what does $2 million per year look like over the next 4 years of investment in this property? And what would that do to the average or the median homeowner? And what would that do to the $3 million homeowner? And then we chose 8 million, so 2 million per year for 4 years, because if you want to double it, and the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the 100 members of the RTM want to all support a $16 million investment, you can just double those numbers. And if you want to cut it in half and not really invest in it, you can do that. So that's what we tried to put forward. I'm happy to answer questions if you guys
Can
can.
I, as a constituent, can I ask a question?
Okay, and
How
then,
long were the portables debated in this town?
A long
I
time.
have that number right here.
And that, how many years?
It's
How many-
way too long.
yeah.
Exactly.
I started 16 years ago.
Exactly, I agree.
And for whatever reason, I think the Board of
Correct.
Ed
That's
did
my
not
point.
bring this
So
project forward.
comparing Great Island to the elimination of portables
Which
is
is what the
verbal
HHR
analysis.
building committee is.
Right, because HHR was way overdue. I think we can all agree in this
Yeah.
room. It should have been addressed 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Finally, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the RTM all got together and said, this is unacceptable. So that $73.5 million or $74 million is an absolute necessary investment in this town. When you think about the other investments, Oxbridge was falling apart. Again, that was an absolute necessary investment in this town, without question. I don't think there's any debate. I voted for every board, every town budget for 20 years, every capital budget for 20 years. If you want to tell me today to write a check, if you want to go spend $250,000 or $500,000 on mental health, I will bring my checkbook out of my car and write a check today. The problem I have is, and I'll ask Jim this, in February and in March of this year, where was Darien Muni debt trading with 20 or 30-year tenor? It was yielding 2 5/8. Today, it's yielding 4%. The same bonds issued in February are yielding 4%. The interest rate curve has moved up dramatically in the last 4 months. So the cost to finance future project, which by the way, HHR is not financed yet, it's not bonded. It'll come after on a timeline perspective. This gets done first. So the incremental cost on HHR from 6 months ago has gone up fairly meaningfully. This has gone up as well. So my point is, this is a massive rush in an interest rate environment that is not accommodating to issue $180 million, round numbers, of incremental debt as the rate curve continues to rise. I don't have a crystal ball, the Board of
Well-
Finance doesn't have a crystal ball, so we don't know what the rate environment's gonna look like a year from now or
We
even
don't.
2 years from now.
We
I can
don't,
tell you with
but-
absolute certainty that, and I think no member of the Board of Finance has any doubts in this town's ability to finance HHR, to
That's not my
finance
point.
Great Island or
That's
other
not my-
projects
that's not
and
my
have
point.
ready access to the capital market.
That's not the point. The point is, it's not the ability to raise debt, it's the ability of what cost. So if you're issuing $180 million of debt, each 1% is $1.8 million of incremental interest
All right.
expense. And I'm gonna go back to 2020, when former board chairman John Zagrodzky came to the Board of Ed and said, we potentially have a problem with tax collection, cut $1 million from the budget, and I think everyone in this room was on the Board of Finance at that time, and said, we are unclear about, Jim, I was at the meeting.
The Board of Finance never said they had a problem with tax collections. They adjusted the ratio and made a mill rate to account for slower tax collections, because as you may know, the governor passed a law which allowed residents in the state to be able to give them basically extra 90 days. for
All right,
each-
but I'm gonna stop this line
Yeah.
of debate, because I think what we're hearing, we know we don't have all the information, that is absolutely true. We know that the interest rate environment and all the other financial factors, we don't know where that's going. All we can do is look at what we see, make assumptions, make our analysis based on the best assumptions that we can make, which you can agree or not agree with, but that's what we've got. And we don't have 18 months to make a decision, even if we would like to. We have 1 week to make a decision, and that's where we are, right?
Yeah, I am not a municipal finance expert. I'm not gonna touch anything that you guys just talked about in the last 15 minutes. And I appreciate the expertise you bring to this conversation. But I wanna come back to the issue of governance. I wanna make sure that what we get for Great Island, for this purchase, and what we put on Great Island is what we actually wanna see. And right now, Teresa, to your point, if we're being told trust the process on what comes up before the decision that we have next Monday, right? We're also being told trust the process for what comes afterwards, which is we're gonna have a committee, but it's gonna be an ad hoc committee, and there's really very little substance to that. There's very little teeth to that. As we know, ad hoc committees of the Board of Selectmen can be changed at any time, they can be disbanded at any time. They're really just a delegation of Board of Selectmen power, which they can revoke at any time. So I have serious concerns about what we as a town will decide to put on Great Island, whether it's left alone as a nature reserve, whether we blacktop the whole thing, or someplace in between, right? There's gotta be a much more robust and thoughtful and inclusive process to gather input and to decide in a way that's long-term meaningful as to what is actually gonna happen on Great Island. Furthermore, considering all the concerns that have been raised about Great Island, again, I trust the municipal finance experts in the room. I don't have an expertise in that. But the number that was thrown out at the prior meeting, I recall, was $7 million a year of debt service cost. I'm just gonna use that as a stalking horse, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. But on top of that, we have all the other costs besides acquisition of remediation and maintenance and development, which is gonna be in the millions again per year, right? So we're talking about I'll put a number, 7 to 10 million, I don't know if that's the right number, but 7 million is the debt number, right? Those are hard numbers, right? When we make the budget in this town, it's about $150 million, right? What's a hard number is debt service and contracts, right? Those are not squeezable year by year, right? What is squeezable is just about everything else. So again, if I don't have an economic forecast, it's not my field. But if people think that we're headed for a recession or that there's economic problems ahead, anytime in the next 30 years, what's going to get squeezed? It can't be interest costs and it can't be contracts because those are not squeezable. So the other things in town are going to get squeezed, like social services, like the discretionary spending in the schools and other town amenities. Again, it doesn't mean you necessarily don't do this, but I would love to see a more robust governance so that what goes on Great Island and how we pay for it is managed in a much more transparent and responsible way that insulates the town from those kinds of pressures.
Carolyn,
Yes.
in relation to what you're saying, Frank, keep in mind, the town has all these different committees, finance, park and rec, all the others. All those people have input in it, and then the RTM of 100 people has input also. So it isn't just 1 or 2 people that are going to decide this. There's going to be a lot of play. And 2, this purchase is purchasing the land. It doesn't say you have to do anything with the old mansion up there that's fallen apart. It possibly should be demolished eventually, but that's something that an independent group like you're suggesting will come to a decision one way or the other, or present it as some options to the different committees in the future.
Bill, I hope so, right? But
Well,
we have no guarantee that anybody's
There
going to
is
take
no-
any responsible
Well,
approach to
I
this
would
and from a
think-
governance point of view.
I think to say that you have no faith in this government here, then what are we all
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
here for?
No.
You're
I'm not-
suggesting something, and it's implicit that we have to trust it. I think that's what you mean.
Hang on, Janet, we have a lot of people in town, everyone around this table and everyone in this room, and everyone who works in town hall, except for Monica, is a volunteer, and I think is operating out of kind of good spirit and I don't think anyone's trying to do anything.
To that.
Right. I'm not accusing anyone of ill will or
No,
bad faith.
What I'm
But I'm
just
saying
saying,
is,
I think you should rely on all of us here to come to a common sense decision on whether the house or whatever you're gonna do. And we're also asking for a decision just to buy the land, not to do something with it
but
in
you can't
stone.
build, you can't buy the land at 100 million and stop and say, oh, well, I'm not gonna spend the money to remediate what I have
You don't
or to
have
secure the property.
You don't have to do something the day after you buy it or the year after you buy it. But eventually the town will have ideas that will be
I
proposed
think-
and acted on
Let
one way
me
or the other.
just say, and maybe one of you know the actual answer, we can't do anything right away. There are people living there,
Yeah.
there are tenants. I don't think anything, I think they're all there
End
through
of
March
Q1.
or something like
Yeah.
that, so,
The leases run through February 2023.
yeah.
Some of which are already currently month-to-month status and could be terminated. Others, you need to give a
Okay.
little bit more notice and so forth.
Okay, so, everybody's right that nothing is gonna happen tomorrow. That all has to play out. Obviously, we gotta figure out, the money, the possible uses, and I know some possible uses have been presented, although I don't think in any, great detail, but, and I'll just say that personally, that the only thing I've seen is the equestrian center because the realtor did not show up for my tour, so I drove in and took a look at that. And, that I wouldn't think is the greatest use for a whole town, although it's fine for private property. So those are all things that are gonna have to be figured out. Okay,
I defer.
Peter?
Go ahead,
and-
go ahead.
all right.
No, Frank, I love what you're saying, 'cause to me, the problem is, we're not voting on it. That's, we're not voting on that, and I would've, again, to go back to the point I made at the beginning, is,
As a contingency.
even some public discussions or public assurances about that type of structure, I think would help a lot of people get past the concerns that you're voicing. And not that they're binding, not that they're accountable per se, but it's the biggest unknown of a whole long list of unknowns. And that's what I'm struggling with, because remember the debate on the Edgerton issue? On, what was the total number amount? There was $75,000? I mean, we went on for hours based on for the debating the use of a $75,000 piece of property. I mean, that's chicken feed compared to all of this. And so that's where my anxiety comes from. I think I share that. And
Well, it's never gonna be easy, and we're never gonna
Right.
get 100%.
Right.
Can I ask you a question,
understand.
since we have a bunch of RTM members
Sure.
here?
Yeah.
If we we're already building Oxford, and we go forward with HHR, and we buy this island, is anyone in this room going to be and track expenses and look at every dollar that we spend and make sure it's being spent on the exact same, like, sort of diligence that we did last year and the year before? Every dollar this town spends, whether it's on an island, whether it's on a contract, whether it's on, Peter, like the property back there where the old senior center used to be. Every single dollar, every contract, everything we spend should be debated and should make sure that we're spending, if we can save $5,000, if we can spend $10,000. Whether it's combining services, whether it's calling a bond that's prepayable at par, whether it's changing the way we invest our funds, every single dollar is supposed to be tracked. So, there's this notion of, well, I don't think anyone on our board, or I've heard any other elected official say, I'm gonna try to take $7 million out of an operating budget to pay for Great Island, or I'm going to take $8.5 million out of an operating budget to pay for Oxford and HHR, because that's not what our residents demand, that's not how we go about our process.
As a constituent, can I comment?
Wait, Shannon's first.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So back to facts then and dollars, and I have a slide from your Board of Finance meeting last week. So what will this cost that average or that median home owner?
Okay,
641, and this is just for the Great Island acquisition, over 5 years, correctly? So 100 and change a year in
No.
prices. Okay, can you correct
No.
that
So-
for me?
if you look at, and we're finally looking for ways to simplify this, because not everybody's
because-
working
yeah,
on a
yeah.
private equity LBO deal,
Right.
right? So if you look at taxes right now for the median homeowner in Darien, based on the 2018 valuation that took place, the median home was valued at 1.25. That wasn't the average sale price in 2018. That's just what the median home was valued at, which means it's assessed at $850,000. The taxes, or I should say the budget and grand list that we all passed a few months ago, will tax the median resident about $14,700. Their taxes will grow based on
All of those
operating
things.
expenses, Oxford, Holmes, Henley, Royal, Great Island improvements, some other assumptions that we've made, okay, to $17,100.
Per year.
Per year?
No,
No.
Okay,
over
thank
5
you.
years, so this year, it'll be 14,700. In 5 years, it'll be 17,100.
So the
So-
annual rate in 5 years will be
Annual rate.
17,000.
So if you look at, to dig in a little bit more, next year, of which there won't be any cost for HHR and won't be any cost for Great Island, we show taxes will go up by $450. The next year, they'll go up by an additional 775, so cumulative 1,200. Okay, the next year, they'll go up by an incremental 570, the next year by incremental 420, and the next year by an incremental 200. Again, this isn't just a result of Great Island, this is a result
It's
of
everything.
everything.
Yeah, I get
So
it.
basically, your taxes go from 14,700, straight line, they increase by about $2,400 to 17,100.
With the small
that-
step in the 5th year.
Correct, of that 2,400, how much of that 2,400 increase from paying 14,000 now and 1,700 in 5 years is attributable over time to Great Island? It's 641 for the purchase. And then if this board, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen approve $8 million of expenditure, again over 4 years, it'll be another $49. And if you compare that, just to put it all in scale, the two large building projects we just approved and are about to start building, right? We'll increase it by about $690 over time,
So that's Ox plus HHR.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
$690 for Ox plus HHR,
Six
and then
seventy
if you look at
plus 30, yep, get it.
641 plus another 50, so let's just call it
700,
six,
just 700,
670.
600.
I think that's not the right way to look at it, in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah, to
hold
me,
on
I-
1 second, I'm gonna give
Wait,
you
sorry,
a chance
sorry,
to talk. but I just
690,
wanna-
sorry, 670 for
Okay.
the schools, 690 if you include $8 million. And then the balance, the biggest piece, in operating expenses are 1,800, and we could be conservative, that could be 2,200.
All right, but that's where those numbers are coming from, and then, let's say, will it stay at 17,000, assuming nobody ever spends
Good question.
another
Okay, so
dime,
from a
or
debt
it'll, you know,
perspective,
it'll,
When you've
If
seen
you
that
do
big
that.
graph where the debt
yeah,
service
yeah,
goes
it
up
goes like
and
that,
then levels
and then
off,
levels
So
off.
taxes
and it
Right.
levels off in year 5,
Right,
okay? And so that'll remain
That's the
steady
sort of the
unless
level.
something else comes up.
right, right.
Well,
It-
but eventually, it won't go down.
It'll stay like that for 10 years, so that's why
Okay.
we looked at the 5-year bridge from 23 to 28, because 28 kind of brings you over some of the peak, which we've been working to restructure our debt over the last 5 or 6 bond issuances, and then it sort of levels out in year 4, so we sort of showed a 5-year increase to be fair, to not make it seem either, till we get to steady state.
Yeah, but to your point, sorry, just one follow-up and then I'll pass it on, and to our constituent. We didn't talk about the impact per household with Ox or HHR, okay, fair. I wanted just to isolate Great Island for that reason, and so that's where, again, I see the 641 and the 49 for the $8 million, which is the Frank Fund, which is an amazing fund for,
Which the Board of Selectmen has not approved, we were just asked to sort of
Right.
show
it's great, Frank Fund.
something.
Hey, Shannon, that's dirty pool.
Sorry, so let's call it 700, so, but again, this is where it's like, it'd be great for all of, as we walk our dogs and talk to people, we had, math for, those that aren't sitting around this table, right? So kind of like our director of communications really communicating this out to our neighbors so that we're able to get their opinions more succinctly. Or more clearly, Jim, $700 over 5 years is the cost for a homeowner, $700 for Great Island in taxes.
700 per year.
I think it's over 5.
No.
No, that's your annual tax.
So
Your
your
annual tax.
taxes are going up in our model for the median homeowner by $2,400. It's not going up $2,400 next year, it'll go up a little bit each year, but over 5 years.
But the annual tax bill is increasing by $2,400.
No.
No.
Not over
No,
5
no,
years.
Over the 5 years.
Little steps, $500 a year
Right, right, right.
basically. and
5
then a
years
little-
from now, it'll
yeah.
be 17,000,
Correct,
and now
correct.
it's 14,000.
But you have to pay that 17,000 every year.
No,
No,
After-
not
After,
till
after
After
5
5
years,
years.
that's what
Yes.
he's saying, it'll
It's the annual
stay,
tax bill.
it'll stay that
Well,
for like 10
eventually,
years or so.
eventually,
Right.
stepping up.
So it'll step up to that, and then you'll pay the 17 over 10 years.
On
and
average,
then
the taxes
something
go up by
else.
$500 a year,
Yeah,
right?
Per year.
So that's
Yeah, roughly
$2,500.
yes.
Of that $2,500, so it goes from, again, 14 and a half, 15.
Yeah,
So it goes up incrementally, right?
And then holds.
Of
And then
that $2,400 increase that we predict over 5 years, or I should say that we're modeling, we don't predict. We model and estimate based on assumptions, okay? Of that, if the town was to invest $8 million, would be 690 of that 2,400 increase, that when you replay this meeting in 5 years and you decide whether we modeled correctly, of that $2,400 increase, 690 would be attributable to
A third.
the acquisition, plus if they did 8 million. 670 of that increase would be attributable to Ox and HHR.
And so that's a third and another third, and what's the final third?
operating,
Generally,
general,
operating increase.
general.
I think, of what? Of
The
what?
general budget.
Okay,
Yeah, general
yep,
budget.
yep. So
Okay.
day-to-day business.
All right, so any
That's
specific,
interesting.
any
That's interesting.
specific number questions you can ask Jim afterward,
Yeah.
I'll recognize David.
With all due respect, that's not the right way to look at it, and I'm gonna tie in Frank's point and Peter's point. They put up a slide, I've seen it, I don't have it in front of me. The overall budget of the town over the next 5 years on an operating basis is going to grow at 4% a year on a compounded.
Sorry,
annual
say
growth
that
rate.
again.
Over the next 5 years, the town's budget in totality is going to increase at least 4% a year over the next 5 years. So while people care about their taxes, and that analysis is completely legitimate and useful, what matters is what Peter mentioned earlier, is as debt servicing climbs, it's going to crowd out other items within the town's budget. So for example, I think the Board of Finance did a great job and presented that right now, debt service is about 6.5% of the budget. It will get close to 11% in 5 years. So as Frank pointed out, that is fixed. Contracts are fixed, teacher salaries are fixed, healthcare premiums are fixed and rising. So as we move over the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, as debt service becomes a greater part of the mix, that means the rest of the budget, Board of Ed, town side, everything else, can only grow at 2.25%. Where have we had a 2.25% growth in the town's budget in what year? We haven't, ever. In, what was it this most recent year,
David,
2.6?
David, what was the average, compounded average 5-year growth rate of the Board of Ed budget from 2017 to 2021?
3%.
No?
Yes, I looked at it the other day, it was 3%. So if, and by the way, the teacher's contract
Are you talking
is
what
budget
was
or
it,
actual
Jim?
spending?
What was it?
2.5%.
and the teacher's contract is up for renewal this summer. So that's not factored into this analysis either. And my point is, as debt service becomes a greater part of the mix, to Frank's point and to Peter's point, other items, whether it's Board of Ed, whether it's fire trucks, whether it's the police station, pick your project, there will be pressure. It's just a mathematical fact. People's taxes will go up, yes, but I don't care if my taxes go up. I care about the pressure on the balance of the town's services and budget, like Peter mentioned. And there are tons of people in this town that are on fixed income, where taxes clearly matter, but we have over 4,000 kids in the schools. And by the way, I know people think that beaches are what's important. Talk to someone in their late 20s or early 30s why they move here. It's because the kids, look, 2 of my kids graduated from Darien High School. My last one just graduated on Friday. Every kid in that high school is given a world-class education. I think it's like 95% of the kids go to 4-year college, a couple military, some work. By and large, I was at a board meeting last year, I don't think Jim was at this meeting, when a member of the Board of Ed stood up at the Board of Ed meeting and said, I'm going to cut money from the superintendent's salary. I want to cut $500,000 to $600,000 from the curriculum chair. Wanted to eliminate those positions. He wanted to cut the the athletic director salary. So to say that there's been no cuts or proposed cuts, I was at a meeting. But it doesn't-
Okay, all right,
Right.
here's what I'm gonna say.
David, I wouldn't, Board of Ed members make certain cuts to drive overall spending. And even when a Board of Ed member votes against the entire budget, they all support the budget,
Okay.
have always supported schools.
But Jim, let me,
You
can I
know,
say one
pretty
quick
much.
question?
Wait.
Can I respond to Jim?
It's outside school.
Because Jim said there's no, John Zubrowski did not say we're gonna have lower collection. I'll read the quote, I have the transcript from the meeting, here it is.
Oh, come on.
No, it's not the one,
This
because
is
people.
All right, read the quote.
You either want it or you don't
No,
want
The
it.
best side of
Read
it,
the
people need to
quote.
know what
Facts are
happens in
helpful.
this town.
Read the quote.
John Zubrowski added, the last item the board would adjust are the collection rates. The collection rate is the percentage of assessed taxes that we expect to collect. We've determined this by taking an average of collection rate of the past 5 years, set that number, and reduced it by 25 basis points. To determine that, the board studied collection rates from 07 to 08, and this is John Zubrowski's direct quote. We picked out the lowest collection rate in that particular period, we assumed collection rate for this budget, Zubrowski said. And that's when they came to the Board of Ed and said, you need to reduce, I'm reading the transcript, $1 million from the budget. So
Okay.
my point is though, is you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts.
Here's what I'm
And we
gonna
don't have
say.
enough facts on it.
Here's what I'm gonna say, it's 9:18.
Yep.
I think we're gonna be almost done with this, and I'm gonna summarize, and then I'm gonna let Paul talk, by saying, you have a set of numbers that the board has worked very hard on, and you should look at that and take that into account as you think about this. You also have a strong argument that says, we don't know what is really gonna happen with the numbers, and you have to think about it also from the perspective of what gets squeezed. And I think those are two things to think about, absolutely. And now I would like Paul to talk.
To address tax collection, and this is a little after the 2008 period David was referring to, because I wasn't on the board at that time. In the last 10 years, the tax collection rate has never been lower than 99.3%. In 1 year, it was actually over 100%.
The one to John Zagorowski in 2000. My point is.
David, you're
I'm-
taking everything completely out of context.
Jim, I was there, but Jim, I was there. I gladly pay my taxes.
This
My
is the
point
one.
is,
Okay, guys,
you
I
guys
think,
looked up these
I think we're gonna
facts that
agree to
aren't facts.
disagree here. We have numbers, you can look at the numbers, you can,
So can I
Worry
just,
about-
at our last caucus, somebody asked, what do I need to do to be a good member of the RTM? And I think we said, do your homework. Everybody in this room should really do their homework. That means watching some of the other meetings. Just watch them.
that is absolutely
Yes.
the
Very
case.
good
Please
point.
watch.
That is absolutely the case, and I think, I've watched as much as I can for now, but I have another week, and so
And
I will.
F&B has their meeting
I would
Wednesday.
recommend that everybody watch the Finance and Budget Committee meeting on Wednesday.
But watch last
Okay.
week's meeting too.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's helpful.
Is there
I would have it.
anyone who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? Any member of the public? Okay.
Yeah, hi. Daniel Moresi. I am Senator Duff's opponent. I came here just to listen to everyone, and first and foremost, I want to say that the one thing I totally support is that whatever happens is your complete decision, and it shouldn't be anybody else's besides the people of Darien. I truly believe that. I don't think anyone should be forced to vote one way or the other. I think it's up to all the boards and all the people and all the residents and the people who actually pay taxes in this town to decide what to do with them. You mentioned something about kids being in their 30s and late 20s, and I'm 32, so I think I can speak on it. And I went through, I'm from Trumbull, but I went to Trumbull High. My family's from Darien, and my uncle and aunt are actually Marge and Rob Trafone. And so I'm familiar with Darien High and everything, and the high school education, although great, I recognize that that wasn't the thing that brought me back here. It wasn't the schools, it was the culture, it was the neighbors, it was the idea of starting a family here is truly the American dream. And I've read a lot about both sides of the argument, and I do not have as much stake of the game as you all have in it. However, I do think it is a very important thing to truly look at the future and what buying this island can do if it's in the right hands. I think that it could be a cultural beacon. I think it could honestly bring residents of Darien something that they can be proud of. I think that it could be used where people can make memories, have weddings, and do whatever, and I think it should be up to the townspeople to do it. And land doesn't depreciate in value. You can't make new land. And I think the devil you know is a lot better than the devil you don't, and I worry that having the state come in and forcing the property to do something that is against the will of the people is way worse than buying it and trying to figure it out. And based off of what I've heard here, and I do believe there is a lot of excess spending in a lot of places, and I don't think it's unreasonable to look at things and to make decisions that are applicable. Times change, budget change, services change. And I don't think that us trying to not be flexible isn't necessarily the answer out of fear. So I do think that this is something to really look at, and like I said, no matter what happens, I will support whatever the people decide. But I appreciate you guys having me here and letting me listen and learning more about it. And like you said, I will do more and more homework.
Thank you for your input.
As a taxpayer, can I make a final comment? Nobody suggested the state's gonna buy this. No one
I know,
suggested
that
to
was-
put 830G
That's
housing
not
there.
No,
There's absolutely-
that's a fear tax.
That-
That
there's
is
That's
abs-
a fear
that
there's
is
tax.
absolutely
State is
no-
not coming in and
there's
spending
absolutely-
$103 million
There's
on
absolutely
land.
no infrastructure that would support affordable housing at that piece of land. There's no food store nearby. There's no drugstore nearby. The public transportation is all the way at the top of Rings End. It is a fear tactic. No one is suggesting, I'm not suggesting, no one opposed to this is suggesting that the town put 830G housing there. The objection is the process and the financing of this project.
If the
And
town
don't-
owns it, they don't
and-
have to do that.
And to Paul, my point is, if you go back and look at 2020, if you read the letter I wrote to the editor and said town collection on taxes would be fine, I didn't say they were gonna dip, I'm the one that said I'm happy to pay my taxes, and cutting $150 from my taxes is criminal. It's $150. I will write a check today, so if you wanna go pull out your spreadsheet with the tax collection data, go read my op-ed from 2020. John Skorotsky's the one that said that they were worried about cutting collections, not me. So
All
I
right,
wasn't on the Board of Finance.
we're not gonna linger on the tax part
Can I
right
just have
now.
one more comment to do?
All right, one more comment, and then we're closing in 5 minutes.
Absolutely. We have a head of communications down in town. Is there any way you can leverage her strategy and skill set to communicate this more clearly to the town? Or even to the RTM?
I would say that this town has tweeted, Instagram, Facebook, and emailed out, and every other social medium that's out there in terms of getting the material from the meetings, the presentations, everything out there. I mean, Jim Cameron, Channel 79, is
Right.
running the meetings and the information
But
sessions on this.
collating, it's about collating and putting it
On
into.
the front page of the town's website, I encourage everybody to go, when you actually click on Town of Darien, the first thing up there in the top right says Great Island, and it has the links to all the stuff as well.
But I don't think so much you have to watch hours and hours of meetings, because we don't have enough time. If we had tons of time,
Yeah.
absolutely, but to just distill it down.
Yeah, there's a good 20-page presentation. The first 15 are glossy pictures of the island and talk
With
about
things that,
Monica's
ideas of what we're gonna do with
Right.
it.
Yeah,
Right.
and then
They're
the
there.
last 5 are the boring ones for the model that we put together to kind of project what your
But
taxes
I mean,
are gonna be.
I guess I would say, I agree with Teresa, it's up to everyone
Yes.
to
Do
go
their
and
homework.
look. And if you're reading something that someone distills down, you're only getting one point of view. So I actually think that what we're doing tonight is one of the best ways to deal with this, is have people in a room actually talking, actually listening to different points of view. And I hope that everyone has been spurred to go home and research, oh yeah, that one thing that I wasn't quite sure of, let me dig into that more and get a better understanding of the finances or the governance or some piece of what we've been discussing. It's not an easy thing, and I'm back to, we're gonna have to vote on this without having the 5-year plan. Greg, I'll let you have the last word.
I'll
Also,
just
if you
encourage-
have questions, there are 2 financial bodies in town, the Board of Finance and the RTM, and the Finance and Budget Committee,
Yeah.
Peter and others are
Yeah,
on.
there are
Yeah.
places
If
to
you guys
go
have questions
in the
and want to
next
see
week,
like
yeah.
a detailed model, projection, cash flows, what different assumptions are, you have it, you can reach out to us. I mean, we're not gonna run 500 different scenarios here, but if you have questions and you want like a detailed answer, exact dollar amounts, interest rate assumptions, like specifics, reach out to us, reach out to the F&B. They're working on the same exact type of detailed analysis.
Just to then bring it closed, I mean, since this is a District 6 RTM caucus, I just want to encourage all my colleagues on the RTM to continue to reach out to your neighbors, reach out to people who may not be engaged in the process, because we know that there's a small number of people who are engaged in the process and a lot of people who are not. And to your point, maybe it's not on them, it's their fault for not being engaged, but I
But we
think
can do our part.
But we represent them nonetheless.
Yes, that's
And
true.
so we have an obligation, I think, to reach out to everyone who we can, neighbors, whatever, especially your constituents in District 6, to get their thoughts on both the strategic benefit and the cost.
Frank, what was your wording about the decision? I think you said that very well. We spent so much time on figures, and you were saying that the decision is bigger than that.
Again, my personal concerns are about governance, but I've had plenty of chance to air that. I'm glad to talk about it.
I think you said it's bigger than a financial.
Yeah, it's more than
exercise.
just a financial.
It's not just a
decision.
financial
Yeah.
investment.
His
it
words,
is.
yes.
Yeah.
To me, it's much, much, much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if
When you
officially I have to have someone
I'll motion to
call a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn, but let's do it. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you,
Okay,
Carolyn.
I'm gonna close the meeting. Thank you, everyone, very much for coming tonight.